Hi, everybody. You're listening to Music, the Unifying Force, Episode 7 Musical Activism from Woody Guthrie to Pussy Riot, Part 1. I'm Janice Siegel.
I'm Yusuf Gandhi, and this is Music, the Unifying Force.
Yeah, now this is such an interesting topic to me uh, because activism really turns songs into different vehicles vehicles for expression, for resistance, for community building, social change. And music has given voice to the marginalized communities. And I will say that it also challenges authority and power so that fascists like Hitler and Donald Trump, that's why they try to ban certain kinds of music or they try to control it. But for me, when I first heard um, Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes and Buffy Sainte-Marie and all of those artists, it made politics accessible to me. It made it personal. It made it emotional because I wasn't interested in it
Right.
really. You just the world is running the way it's running, and I was busy being a teenager. But politics and music together made me think. Was such a powerful force. I realized that it could change people. You know.
Yeah, and it was always the musicians who would stand up
Yes.
from more than anyone else. They didn't mind speaking out. They always spoke out about everything, and that's the first artist we're going to listen to a bit is Billie Holiday, who actually before any of the March on Washington or anything else, she was the first one to really speak out and speak the truth about what was happening. And we'll talk about that much after we listen to a
Yes.
bit of
There's a
Billie
lot to
Holiday.
say about this song.
Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Yes, that was Strange Fruit. And it was written actually by a Jewish individual. And
Abel Mirapol.
yeah, and he was reading about these people who were being lynched.
He saw a photograph,
Yes, he saw a
like a stark black and white photograph that somebody took, and he was rightfully horrified, and that's when he wrote the song.
Yeah, and Billie Holiday heard the first version. I think he had someone else sing it,
That's right.
and she immediately wanted to sing it because she had seen actual people, sort of hanging from trees, and she wanted to sing it. And she was, I think, one of the major labels, and they would not let her do it. So it was another Jewish label that was actually who were Billy Crystal's cousins. I think it was Billy Crystal's uncle who produced the record and put it out. So it was great to, see that they finally put it out. And Billie Holiday sang it all the time. She was told not to sing it. Even her own people told her you should not sing it
Well, it
because
was considered
it
dangerous.
was dangerous for her, but she didn't care. And that's one of the reasons she got killed eventually.
Yes, when she sang it at the Cafe Society here in New York. But I remember hearing it for the first time and wondering, what is this strange fruit?
Mhm.
So, and when I realized what it was, I was nauseous. I was horrified.
Yes.
So, this is she was bringing this brutal reality of lynching to a great audience, like
Yes.
people like me, teenagers in Brooklyn,
Yes.
white teenagers who I'm so grateful that she sang the truth, and she always sang the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did. It was something that was so, uh, you know, moving actually. Every time I hear that song, you're moved. You feel you almost feel like crying in a way because you saw something that was happening which you never believed or even imagined could happen.
Yes. Well, it happens, and it's happening.
It's now happening again in different
happening
ways,
again.
and that's why we're doing this episode because of that, and
Right. It's very current.
mhm.
The 60s, though, were
Yes,
that's
was it?
when I grew up, and um, it was an age of protest, and everybody had a guitar, and everybody was singing "The Cruel War" and "Blowing in the Wind," and
Yes, and there was so much of segregation. They've said this whites only, black only thing was so strong at that time. And it was again the musicians who were standing up. And initially it was, of course, Woody Guthrie
yes,
who really stood up for that, with his songs.
yeah, his guitar said something. This guitar kills fascists or something.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think um, that maybe I think Jesse Wells, who we'll get to very much later,
Yeah.
who is like today's Woody Guthrie, has that on his guitar as well. But he was blending his Oklahoma folk tunes with political commentary, fighting against racial discrimination, certainly. Oh, but here's an interesting thing that I discovered, and I'm going to read it actually. Woody Guthrie wrote songs about Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, who I remember growing up, a landlord who practiced racial discrimination, most notably in the unpublished 1950s lyrics Old Man Trump. He wrote a song actually called Old Man Trump, which denounced his racist housing policies at the Beach Haven apartment complex in Brooklyn, which is where I grew up. So we were very aware of this grifter, and racist.
He was
Yeah,
because I think he
was.
had a card. He carried the KKK card, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. And Woody Guthrie, though, was like the idol of, I think, everyone in the folk music, folk movement, rather, right? Phil Oakes, also one of my favorites. But he had this he had a sharp wit and
Yes.
poetry to his lyrics that I really loved.
And he didn't speak about just one event. He spoke about war in general, everything in general, in a way when he spoke. But we should listen to Woody Guthrie, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a great and a bloody fight round this whole world tonight. In the battle, the bombs and shrapnel rain. Hitler told the world around he would tear our union down, but our union's gonna break them slavery chains. And our union's gonna break them slavery chains.
Oh, more and more.
Oh, yeah, you want to hear a lot of it, but we can't.
I know we
But
can't
we-
because there's so
It's
much.
so much to hear, and so
cover,
much
yeah.
to do in such a short time. But we do send you the full links to all the songs we play, the excerpts of the songs we play, and you can, and plus more of them. In fact, this time we're going to send you even more, and we'll talk about them. We'll send you Phil Oakes, we'll send you other artists as well, so you can listen to them. And
Okay, well, if we talk about this era, we have to talk about the Weavers, certainly, which was Pete Seeger, Ronnie Gilbert, Lee Hayes, and Fred Hellerman. And I love them because of their harmony, of course. But they also offered this vision of an inclusive America with challenging oppression and championing the working man, in the tradition of Woody Guthrie, certainly. They all were also blacklisted.
yes, they were. In fact, they also inspired other people, uh, uh, like Peter, Paul, and Mary and other artists.
I also love
Yes, so they inspired those musicians also. They
Yes.
inspired a lot of, I think, Mamas and the Papas. I have a feeling all of them were inspired by them.
absolutely the Weavers. Oh yeah, and they did folk music from all around the world too. That was a great
Yes.
way to open your mind to other cultures and other musics. But you know, they were fantastic. Pete Seeger, of course, was an incredible force in that group.
Yes, and the song, especially "If I Had a Hammer," was like a total anthem in a way.
Oh yeah,
It's still today, I think,
I still
a lot
remember
of
the
around
chords.
campfires and scouts and everything. I
Yeah,
remember even in India in scouts campfire, everyone had to sing "If I Had a Hammer."
I could sing it right now.
Yeah, why don't you?
But why don't we listen to the Weavers?
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out a warning, I'd hammer out love between all of my brothers, all over this land.
That's probably public domain by now. Yeah,
I don't know
I don't
because
know.
they also somebody else does it and does it a little different, and they put it as a
Yeah,
they can do it, but actually it should be public domain. I have a feeling it is,
yeah,
but I'm not sure about
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I mean, talk about inspirations for other people. I mean, to me, that's a mark of a great artist, a
Yes.
legacy artist, is how many people they've inspired.
Yes.
Little offshoots that they've started. Odetta was one.
Odetta was one. She inspired so many artists, the younger artists who came after her.
Well, yeah.
And
I mean, Joan Baez
yeah,
and Bob
Joan
Dylan
Baez
for
is
sure.
yeah, definitely. And
I remember as a teenager going to McDougal Street and seeing her at the Gaslight Cafe. I mean, she was playing a lot in the 60s and even beyond that. I mean, powerful voice, and spirituals, but also blues, jazz. Very. I went back and listened to a bunch of her records and remembered that incredible voice, powerful voice.
And of course, one of the people she really inspired was Joan Baez, and
Yes.
and everyone remembers the March on Washington, and it was actually organized, I think, by a lot of people were involved, and I think Harry Belafonte was one of the people involved in organizing that march as well.
Absolutely.
And but the first song that was sung when they started the march, they had sung the first song was Joan Baez sang Odetta's "Oh Freedom." That's what she sang to begin the the show, and in fact I think she sang a song late after that too. We'll talk about that, but she was such an important part of that whole march, and
Right.
there's also a picture of her walking with Martin Luther King, and of course Joan Baez. Even today, she's such a important person.
But she hasn't stopped speaking.
Yeah, she's not stopped
She's done
speaking
stop.
out. She's not stopped singing or anything. She's always been right in the forefront of anywhere she sees injustice, and so let's listen to Joan Baez singing "Oh Freedom."
Oh, freedom over me, and before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
Powerful.
Mhm.
And powerful also was the great Mahalia Jackson.
Yes. And she was so important for that march, actually, because she also, it seems that Martin Luther King had prepared a full speech, and she was the one who told him that, he should speak about his speech about "I had a dream and I've been to the mountaintop" and all
He
that.
wasn't going to do that?
He was not, and I believe he decided to. He had the speech written with the law, and that's what I believe. I don't know, I mean, from what I've read, I believe
Mhm.
that he then changed the whole speech. Just he spoke off the cuff with what Mahalia told him to do, and because she sang at his funeral. She wanted her to sing at his funeral throughout. So it was for him. Mahalia was like the whole one major part of that whole movement, and her music was
Plus, she's the queen of gospel.
yes, she was, and as I said, if I remember, I told you earlier that she had come to India, and she sang in a little church in India. She came through the government, and it was incredible, And
She sang all over India? Or
no, she came to Bombay. She
Bombay.
sang at a church in Bombay, and I don't know if she went other places because at that time I was in high school or in college or something, and my friend managed to get 2 tickets for us to go there because his father was a piano tuner. He was tuning the piano.
Need that piano?
Yeah,
Yep.
and so we went there to see her, and it was incredible, So, and then she sang at the All India Radio, which is like our NPR over there.
Yeah.
She sang on that too.
I think we should hear a little bit of Mahalia. Maybe
Yes,
We Shall Overcome.
We Shall Overcome,
Yeah.
which actually was sung by Joan Baez at the show, but at the march, and Mahalia sang another song. But we'll listen to Mahalia singing "We Shall Overcome" because hers by far is the most powerful version.
Oh,
of
yeah,
that song,
absolutely. I mean, it's a powerful balance
Yes,
between the music and the nonviolent
right.
philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
We shall overcome, Lord, one day. Yeah, 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 yeah. If in our heart we do believe, Lord, we shall overcome. Lord, one day.
So good. And it's very jazzy.
Yes.
I mean, it's very jazzy. Her sense of rhythm and swing is right there. Woo! We have to talk about Bob Dylan,
Yes.
of course,
And who was also at that,
also there.
and it's actually, Harry Belafonte told me, told a story about Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
and he was not really singing that time. It was actually, he was a harmonica player too, right?
Well, he
And-
mumbled.
Yeah, and
It didn't even matter.
and Harry Belafonte said that he came to the studio, and Bob Dylan is known to be very reserved, very quiet. He doesn't do anything. Even it seems that when he played at the White House, he just did his show and went away. He didn't hang
Played
out.
for Obama, right?
Yes, Obama, but he did his show, and after a few minutes left. He doesn't
Doesn't hang.
hang out too much, So it seems that he came to do this. His regular harmonica player that they needed, Harry Belafonte said could not make it. Something happened, so he asked. They sent him Bob Dylan to play his harmonica. So he said he came. He was very quiet. He never spoke a word. He was told what to play. He played what he had to, finished, and left. He didn't talk to anyone. So Harry Belafonte said he thought that he was a racist and didn't, was not, because he didn't realize that that's how he is.
That's how he is.
And then he came for the, afterwards, I believe he met him or something, and then he realized he's not that kind of guy. And
Yeah,
then he had them come. He also was very instrumental in asking them to be there at the march, because he was helping organize the march.
Yeah. I mean, he's made such evocative records, even though he really wasn't a singer
No.
of sort. And he mumbled a lot, talked a lot of his words, but it worked.
Yeah, but his songs were like
Songs were poetry.
poetry and great,
Beautiful.
and he was always in everything, wherever he went, he was that reserved person. That was one of his characteristics. I believe it still is. I guess. But even George Harrison said that when he called him for his Bangladesh concert, he didn't even know he was going to come or not because he said, yeah, I'll come. And they said, yeah, I can't play with all these type of guys because they're so great, such great guys. That's the way he was looking at it. He was nervous to play with, but George said he just told him, come if you want to. And he came, and suddenly he was backstage and he came and played. But it was, but he was always very nervous about playing with a lot of people,
Yeah.
the musicians.
Well, I could.
Yeah, and we should not, we should definitely listen
We
to
should
his,
definitely hear
the
some
classic, which is like it's like a standard. It could
Blowing
be
in
a
the Wind.
blues, rock, folk, everything
And
standard.
this was another
Yes.
song every teenager of my
Yes.
acquaintance knew
And
and knew how to play on the guitar.
and like it's Stevie Wonder did it, and
That's right.
You had so many different people doing it.
Probably people who shouldn't have been singing it
Yes.
sang it.
Yes. So let's play "Blowing in the Wind."
Yes, and how many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is a blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Yeah, the answer is
Yes.
blowing in the wind.
And so many other great songs.
Oh, Masters of War,
Masters of
The Core
War,
of War,
Times They Are Changing.
Times Are Changing, yeah.
And
Don't Think Twice,
Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, and then of course,
and on and on and on and on.
yeah,
Bob Dylan was a major force in this activism and music.
yes,
Yeah. And going to another side of town, you've got Marvin Gaye.
yes,
For
the whole
instance.
R&B side, but
Yes.
it was, the whole Motown, it was like a well-oiled machine, actually. Berry Gordy was very particular what everyone sang and didn't
He
sing.
probably really
Yeah, he
bared down on
good.
their
Yeah, because he
A&R.
wanted them to cross over to the white audience. That's why he didn't want them to say anything that would upset the white audiences. And, because he had already succeeded, I think one of the first all black labels to succeed in crossing over to white audiences. So he didn't want to rock the boat. And so because of that, in fact, initially before that, I think there was a song written for the Temptations called "War." What is it? What are you fighting for? But that was written for the Temptations.
Oh,
But Berry Gordy thought that if they do that again, they would. So that's why Edwin Starr did it.
okay. And it became a huge
It
hit.
became a huge hit. And if you listen to the song, you realize this could have been written for the Temptations.
Well, they could have nailed it too.
Yeah, it was
Certainly.
the whole their sort of structure, the way they sang. So it was written for Edwin Starr because of that. The same thing with Marvin Gaye but Marvin Gaye was very particular, very determined, and when he wrote "What's Going On" and went to Berry Gordy said, "No, you can't do it," and he said, "No, I'm going to do it," and he did it. And not only that, it was the first time actually about the musicians, the Funk Brothers, Berry Gordy never put their names. And this is the first time, like, Marvin Gaye wanted to put the names of
The musicians.
the musicians, and that's the first time James Jameson's name came on a record,
Yeah.
and people realized who he was because everyone would say, "Oh, I'm playing Motown bass," in a way,
Yeah.
Yeah, even Paul McCartney was influenced by James Jameson, but he would say he was playing the Motown bass till the whole thing changed.
Yeah. Well, Marvin Gaye had a few skirmishes, I think, with Berry Gordy.
Yeah, but he was
And,
he had done so much that he could afford to.
And also at that time also was Nina Simone.
Mhm. Yes.
And her quote is, "It's an artist's duty to reflect the times." So, I mean, she, from the get, she's one of the most extraordinary artists,
Definitely.
I think, of the 20th century. From her classical playing to her choice of repertoire. Sometimes she picks these kind of sappy songs, weird, like white bread songs, for want of a better word. And then she'd come up with something like Mississippi Goddamn.
So So should we play Mississippi Goddam and then do
Marvin?
Marvin a little later? Yeah.
Yes.
So let's play Mississippi Goddam.
And everybody knows about Mississippi Goddam. Can't you see it? Can't you feel it? It's all in the air. I can't stand the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. Alabama's gotten me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi Goddam.
Wow. There have been a couple of contemporary versions of this too. Andrew Day, I think.
Yeah, Andrew Day. And Andrew Day played Billie Holiday, actually.
Oh,
for
that's
the
right.
free,
That's
you know.
right. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And people who've not seen the movie, please see it. It's a
Yeah.
great movie.
we have something from Marvin Gaye.
Yes, What's Going On? That's the song which I said that
Yeah.
Berry Gordy did not want Marvin Gaye to play.
Don't punish me with brutality. Oh, talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on, baby?
There's nothing better.
Yeah, and he was a
Marvin
great
Gaye.
pianist too. And
Really.
yeah, he was a very good pianist. And he always had a good band.
Yeah, he was a great songwriter.
Yeah.
And yeah, wrote a little bit with one of his partners, Leon Weir, as well.
Yeah.
Who they did that great record, I Want You. And yeah, with the cover by Ernie Barnes, the painting with Ernie Barnes. Yeah. And then even more contemporary would be Gil Scott
Yes.
Heron.
Gil Scott Heron, as most people say, was the godfather of rap music. In a
Yeah.
way, you know, he was. There's no doubt about it. In fact, the Public Enemy used to always say that, and then even Clive Davis once in an interview said he was the godfather of rap. And the thing was about Gil Scott, he was actually a jazz pianist also.
Did
You
not
know,
know that either, but it
yes.
makes total
And
sense.
for him, it was basically spoken word. He didn't know. If you asked him, "Oh, you doing rap?" Afterwards, when the rap came, and he said, "No, I'm just, reciting poetry." As far as he was concerned, that
Yeah.
was spoken word for him. And I used to book him, so my colleague Bruce Nichols was taking care of a lot of his business, and Bruce and I were the only people in our agency that booked him. And it was great because he, as I told you, he had this habit of being late a lot, and we used to, but most promoters knew he would be late, and most audiences knew he would be late.
So they were
Once
chilled.
Yeah, they wouldn't be upset, and as soon as he came on, they knew they'd get the best show of their lives, and that's how he was. He had an incredible sense of humor. He really, he was one of the first people to really hit the nail on the head as to what was happening, whether someone was going to the moon, where he said "Whitey on the Moon" is what he wrote that song. Then things like, but where he talks about how people, I don't have my sister doesn't have medical. Cannot get her medical thing treated, whereas this guy's on the moon, so I'm going to send my bill to him. Something like that, things like that. But that's how he was. He spoke out, and he was one of the few, they had this concert for Nukes, big concert when Detroit Island, there was this nuclear plant that exploded or something, and a lot of people were hurt, and the whole island was, and I think it was called 10 Mile Island, or
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and
Oh.
and he sang over there called "We Almost Lost This Detroit," which was a song he
Oh, it's
wrote.
7 Mile.
7 Mile. I'm not sure how
Yes.
many miles. But
It was a good number.
I
of miles.
remember the thing. Yeah, and he so he wrote that song at that
Eminem,
place.
his Eminem,
Yes,
that was the name of his movie.
yes, I think could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is like, such a long time ago when all rock artists were playing. He was there with them, and he was at the summer fest during Woodstock. When they had that festival in Harlem, where it was at the same time as the Woodstock Festival, but that's why they didn't get televised till now. And so it was a lot of things he was involved in, but the greatest part of it was his poetry, and he was actually around the same time as this was in the late 60s, 70s, actually, when he started performing, right? I think when he wrote the song we're going to play, which is The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. But he sort of, it was around the same time as what was happening in Jamaica and all, which is dub poetry, which was much before.
Right.
And in fact, many people say, besides Gil Scott-Heron, it is dub poetry which also influenced the rappers, because that was much before
Dub
the rap.
poetry was Bob Marley's thing.
Not before Linton Kwesi Johnson. Yeah, it's part of dub poetry,
Yeah.
which he did, but it was like Linton Kwesi Johnson and dub poets like that. And in fact, I remember Linton Kwesi and Gil Scott-Heron did a whole college tour together, so it was an amazing event. And we will send you, we can't play Linton Kwesi because, again, of the time constraint, we will send you a track of his,
That's great.
and so here's Gil Scott-Heron with one of his most, famous tunes called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle.
Powerful. Powerful. Moving a little forward,
Yes.
Grandmaster Flash and then Furious Five.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that they brought hip hop from a party music
Yes,
to
to
a political
yes.
music,
political and more,
social
activity,
commentary.
more social
Yeah.
commentary. They did that
Yeah.
because before that, around the same time you had the Sugar Hill Gang, which was more
Right.
of that, dance, hip hop.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Grandmaster Flash came. Actually, Grandmaster Flash was influenced by another rapper called Afrika Bambaataa, who came in from Africa, who was from here, but who had gone to Africa and then came back with his own brand of rap. But it was still more party music. And then Grandmaster Flash came into the whole thing and, was one of the first people to really. And of course, then you have this group of lots of people from Public Enemy to, Run DMC and
Mhm.
who were the other guys? A Tribe Called Quest and everyone
Yeah.
else. And the West Coast rappers then came in with Eazy-E, NWA, and the whole thing. But you had,
De La Soul.
but you had De La Soul, you had all of them. That whole, what they call the native tongue, that group was called Queen Latifah. They were, and Moni Love, who was from London, and British rappers were coming in. And then, of course, there was KRS-One, who
Yes.
I want to talk about because we were planning to play a song, but we'll play that. We'll send it to you.
That'll be
because,
part of the
yeah, that part of
list.
this that we
No,
will
we
send
will
to you.
play something from
Grandmaster
Grandmaster
Flash.
Flash.
But I'd like to say something
Yeah,
about KRS-One.
KRS-One.
Yes, because KRS-One was like he was a philosopher. Again, he was one of the artists I booked. So I knew he was like, every time, every show in the, before he went on stage, after his sound check, he would go in his room, lock himself in and read books on philosophy. And
Well, that's what I do.
yes, he was so much into that, and he would talk, you can talk to him on any subject. And one of the problems was he never had a manager. He managed himself, though he had his attorney who would advise him about everything. But he was his manager, and that's why he never really got I feel if there's anyone who should have got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's KRS-One, because he was there before a lot of people got it now, like LL Cool J and Salt and Pepper. KRS-One actually started the Stop the Violence movement, where there was so much violence at rap shows, and he started this where he had all the rappers, he gathered together, and they all did a record together requesting people to stop the violence, so he was very much into all that. He was an activist in that real sense of the word, not just the negative part for the positive part of rap. And that's KRS-One, and I'd like to, but of course we should play Grandmaster Flash.
Yes, we should.
Yes, because he was it was one of the first rappers, and the first rapper to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was Grandmaster Flash.
So let's play The Message, I think is what we've got planned.
I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Wow. Which brings us to the TikTok generation.
Yes.
And a young man named Jesse Wells, who has really, he did not arrive a moment too soon.
Yes.
I mean, he's so on top of everything. Something horrific happens, and then the next day there's a song about
I know, you're right. He's like a prolific writer. It's just every time
Yeah.
I look, he's got another song out
Yeah.
there.
He's only
He's
33 years old.
Yeah, and he's just putting out songs like, in a way he's prolific the way Bob Dylan was prolific.
That's right.
that-
And
in
he's
the
got
same
that
manner,
gravelly
yes.
voice, too.
Because
He's a
people,
good guitar player.
musicians say that one thing about Bob Dylan, he could write a song in, a few minutes if you tell him the title, and he wrote the song, and Jesse seems to be that. Jesse
Yeah,
Wells
my
seems to be-
favorite is Join Ice. I mean, he's written War Isn't Murder. He wrote a bunch of really interesting stuff, but this Join Ice thing is too much. Let's hear a little Jesse Wells.
If you're in need of a gig that'll make you feel big, come with me and put some folks in detention. Just last week was kinda tough. I put a kid in cuffs. I zip-tied a lady to a van. We can sneak around town hunting working folks down. I hear they get a great benefit plan. Join Ice, boy, ain't it nice? Join Ice, take my advice. If you're lacking control and authority, come with me and hunt down minorities. Join Ice.
Look at that. Yeah,
He's-
he's got
yeah,
that sense of humor,
it's a
it's
great
irony.
track to end with, in a way.
Yes, it is.
And this is actually the first part of our series on a two-part series on activism, because we're going to the rest of the world.
Yeah,
I'm sorry we cannot do everything, because I know everyone will say there's so many activist singers.
we
that
left
we
out
can go. We can-
X, Y, and Z.
Bruce Springsteen is an activist in his own way. There we had Alicia Keys. who's
Yes,
an
Alicia
activist.
Keys,
He is an activist.
Absolutely.
We had
Global
John
health,
Lennon, who's
women's
one of the
empowerment.
greatest.
Yeah.
John Lennon, who wrote Imagine, which is actually we didn't play it because I'm sure everyone has heard it, so it doesn't
Yeah.
but that's a song that an activist
But
writes.
here's a nice quote from Alicia Keys. A woman becomes a lioness when she sees her unborn child's future juxtaposed with the horrors of the world. So I think maybe that is what motivated her to launch all her programs for criminal justice and reform.
And one of the things is she did sing with a lot of people from Africa, musicians, and when we are doing the international activists in the next set, we'll go with that.
So this is Music, the Unifying Force. I'm Janice Siegel.
And I'm Yusuf Gandhi, and I would advise you request you to go on our website, musictheunifyingforce.com, because you will see all the all the songs will be given to you there. A lot of songs, listening songs, and even as we were talking about Imagine, I think we'll put in the song by Herbie Hancock from the Imagine Project,
Yes.
which is a very interesting, version of Imagine. So
It's a reimagined version
yes,
of
and
Imagined.
so see you next time. Once again, thank you for listening.